Now, to pick up where we left off, the Persian Empire, arguably the first pluralistic global empire, which had been led and established with great strength and intelligence by Cyrus the Great and Darius, was now in the hands of a spoiled and privileged playboy, Xerxes, the first to ascend the throne of Susa, not by accomplishment or experience, but by bloodline. Esther chapter 1, verses 4 to 8. For a full 180 days, King Xerxes displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. This is how our story begins. Excess, decadence, and debauchery. This was Xerxes' claim to fame. This is what he was known for. This was his forte, his strength and skill, if we can call it that. Xerxes often won the favor, the allegiance, and the support of others the only way he knew how, with excessive celebration. You see, because Xerxes was terribly spoiled and insecure. Even in his 30s, as he ruled the known world, Xerxes still partied like he was a frat boy, always propping up his popularity amongst his buddies, his dignitaries, and his advisors. You see, because Xerxes exercised very little independence and showed very little discernment or maturity. In fact, when the king wanted to conclude nearly 6 months of feasting and festivities with one final banquet, in a drunken stupor, he called forth his queen to, quite likely, be undressed and paraded around for his guest. When his queen refused to take part in such a demeaning display, Xerxes' immaturity and insecurity were truly exposed, more so than he had hoped his queen would be. As it says in verses 10 to 20. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media. Apparently, having the queen paraded around was a matter of law and justice. According to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? Xerxes asked. She has not obeyed the commands of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. The nobleman, Memucan, Hadouken! Replied in the presence of the king and the other nobles, saying, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Notice that all of a sudden she is no longer Queen Vashti, just Vashti. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. Sure they will. I mean, talk about insecure. It almost sounds like something out of The Handmaid's Tale. I mean, not only is this king unable to make a decision on his own and incapable of being told no, But apparently he's also surrounded by a boys' club of fearful, fragile, and insecure men, if we can call them that. I mean, good grief, your wife doesn't want to be publicly paraded around and gawked at, and so Xerxes issues a royal edict informing all the women worldwide, hey, listen, ladies, you're not the boss of me. This is how the story of Esther begins. This is how this wonderfully unique book of the Bible, with all of its theatricality and comedy of errors, starts. With a pouty, spoiled crybaby of a king. With someone who has tremendous authority and influence and is wasting it on selfish and stupid endeavors. Someone who was raised to rule, was groomed to become a great leader, but is failing to reach their potential. You're thinking of someone, aren't you? It's easy to judge, isn't it? You see, this is the thing about how this story starts. It's easy to read the first chapter and think that King Xerxes is a totally useless and unredeemable character. It's easy to think we can just write him off. But I think that's the challenge. Because if you think about it in terms of where the story goes, how the character evolves or might be used by God, even if God is never spoken of, I don't think we're supposed to write him off. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a fool. There's little or nothing here to inspire or admire. But maybe, just maybe, this first section of the story, this strange and unexpected introduction, is supposed to put us in conflict with our expectations. Maybe we're supposed to question our own judgment, or at least our judgment of others. You see, because in ancient rabbinic commentary, King Xerxes, later on in the story, even in the first verse of chapter 2, is often characterized as remorseful or filled with regret because of what he had done to his queen. And sadly, she was likely executed. Which puts us in an interesting position. Because in a story and setting such as this, in a strange and foreign land, during a time of exile, when the name of God isn't even mentioned, I think the question for us is, can this still be redeemed? Can something good come from these circumstances? This setting and story with these leaders and nations, is it even possible? Can we believe in something greater, something better, even for these sad and disappointing men? When we come to chapter 2, I think we'll find the author of our story has something better in mind. Next time on Esther in Isolation. Now, at this point in the story, King Xerxes has calmed down and may even feel a little remorse. And yet, he's lonely. And what does an immature and insecure international leader do when he's lonely? He holds a beauty contest.